Hello and welcome, everyone. This time we are in southern Italy, in the region of Campania, in the interior province of Avellino, where the landscape rises into low Apennine hills, cut by fields, orchards, and narrow provincial roads. It is 12:30 a.m. on Wednesday, August 31st, 1977. Rocco Cirulo and Michele Giovaniello, 24-year-old students, are walking along one of these rural roads between the towns of Sturno and Frigento. Then they see lights, red, green, white, coming from a hill near an old quarry. There's a strange sound, mechanical and off-frequency, and in the trees something silvery, standing still, then moving. They run, but they're smart enough to know no one's going to believe them, not without backup. 5 more stable men, then they return. The lights are still there. So is the figure. What follows is a long night. You can imagine the rest. Eventually, they go to the police. The police listen, patiently. Then they tell them to forget it. Keep their mouths shut. It's better this way, they say. That advice comes from higher up. It is 12:30 a.m. on Wednesday, August 31st, 1977. Rocco Cirulo and Michele Giovaniello, 24-year-old students, are walking along a rural road in the hills of Avellino province, between the small towns of Sturno and Frigento. Suddenly, the two men observe a red light among the small bushes and trees on a small hill beside the road. As they continue walking, they see a green light, positioned slightly higher than the red one, as well as 2 white lights on the sides. They hear a sound, modulated, continuous, something like a Morse radio signal, but outside the usual radio frequencies. The 2 young men keep walking. Then they see something, a figure. It's glowing white, silvery. The moonlight bounces off what looks like a metallic suit. The figure is standing among the trees, half hidden in the low brush. At first, it doesn't move. Then it takes 2 slow steps toward them. The men freeze. They don't know what to think. And then they run. Straight to Castelluzzo, the nearest village. There, they find 3 others: Pascucci, Capobianco, and D'Ambrosio. Pascucci is a 26-year-old student, Capobianco a teacher, and D'Ambrosio works as a turner. Now 5 in total, they all pile into D'Ambrosio's car and head back to the site. It is now 1 a.m. They park the car and continue on foot. They can confirm that the light, the strange sound, and the radiant figure, still motionless, are all still there. The men feel a sense of unease and head back to the car, but curiosity gets the better of them, and they return to the same spot. The being seems to take notice of the men and starts moving toward them. But as the men retreat to the car, the being also draws back. This is repeated 2 or 3 times, and each time the men flee, the being retreats as well. After about 15 to 20 minutes, the 5 men head down to the village to get a large flashlight. There, they run into 2 more people. Mario Sisto, a baritone at the San Carlo Theater in Naples, and Michele Rifoli, a 47-year-old photographer. All 7 now, they climb back into D'Ambrosio's car and return to the site. It is now approximately 1:30 a.m. They stop the car at a spot from which they can overlook the area where the being is located, but keep the engine running for safety. When Capobianco points the flashlight beam at the being, which is about 20 to 25 meters away, it seems to become disoriented. It stops, then begins walking in the direction of the light, while blinking continuously and in short bursts with two orange-red lights located on its head just above the eyes. They drive off toward Frigento to contact the police, all of them shaken and unabashedly afraid. On the way, they pass a quarry, and Antonio Pascucci points out a bright glow to the others. It becomes clear that the light is coming from something either hanging in the air or standing on the hilltop, just in front of the quarry. The light is white, bright, and intense. It spills across the rock walls above the quarry, lighting them up completely. For a few seconds, they can see the object itself. It's cylindrical and vertically segmented into vertical bands of light and dark rings. At the top, the object has a dome that glows with a fierce, concentrated light. The men leave the scene intent on informing the police, but whether they find no one available or decide to return on their own remains unclear. It is now 2 a.m. The 7 men return to the spot where the being is located. They leave the car nearby and position themselves to watch from a distance. This time, they stay for an hour and 20 minutes. At some point, they decide to shine the flashlight at the being. It begins to approach, then suddenly starts gesturing wildly. At the same time, its 2 orange-red eyes light up again. The men hear the same strange, irregular noise they had heard earlier. The men interpret the gestures in 2 ways, partly as a signal for them to come closer, and partly as a sign directed toward the moon, which is high in the sky. They take it as an attempt to communicate that the being is not from here. Immediately after the gestures, an intense white light radiates from the being's head, lighting up the surroundings and the 7 men. Some of them shout, "The laser beam! The laser beam!" and they all rush to the car. Once inside the car, they realize that the intense light has not caused them any harm, even if they were momentarily disoriented for a few seconds. The being retreats, and they are able to observe its features in detail. Compared to the nearby trees, they estimate its height to be over 2 meters. Later, using a large branch as a reference point, they measure the distance from the branch to the ground. It comes out to 2.4 meters. The red light, they note, was about 1.8 meters above the ground. The being's body appears well proportioned. The head sits directly on the shoulders without a neck. The suit is of a silvery metallic color, covers the entire body, and reflects the moonlight. The upper part of the body appears perfectly formed, with clearly defined joints. On the head, where the eyes would be, the being has 2 intense light sources, orange-red in color, without reflection. They shine continuously but unsteadily. Some of the men notice a black box on its right forearm, while others observe a kind of metallic belt that wraps around its sides. Not everyone sees the same details. This might explain why there is disagreement about the presence of the black box or the belt. For example, no one observes what the upper limbs used for gripping actually look like. The lower part of the being remains hidden at all times by dense vegetation. When the being moves back and forth, it does so without bending its knees. The movements are stiff, yet perfectly balanced. It never turns its back on the men. Once again, it walks toward them, but each time the frightened witnesses pull away, it retreats. This back and forth repeats several times. Meanwhile, they hear other sounds nearby. This only deepens their suspicion that there may be more beings on the hill. At 3:15 a.m., they decide to return to the village to look for more witnesses, but no one else is awake, and their search leads nowhere. So they head back to the quarry. By now, it's around 3:30 a.m. This time, the place is silent. Empty. Whatever had happened is over. They stand there for a while, talking through what they saw. Then they part ways and go home. The following morning, some of the men return to the quarry, where they discover 3 large circular marks on the ground. Here we see actual footage of the imprints left at the site, shown in a clip published by Ufologia e Misteri about the Sturno encounter. News of the landing and the 7 men's encounter with the being spreads throughout the village and eventually reaches Mayor Dr. Alberto Frigento, who informs the Frigento police. The police go to the site and examine the markings. That same afternoon, August 31st, the 7 men are brought together at the police headquarters for questioning. There, they are first questioned individually and then as a group. Finally, the police write down each man's oral account. Afterwards, they are advised to keep quiet about their experience. It is better, and in everyone's best interest, to forget this incident, they are told. This advice comes from higher up, the policemen add. The case quickly draws attention. 2 investigators, Tellerico and Russolillo, begin looking into the events. Their focus is not only on what was seen, but also on who these 7 witnesses were. The authorities in Sturno confirm that the men are known to be honest and trustworthy. Only 2 of the 7 men know each other beforehand, because they both live in Naples. The other 5 aren't connected in any way apart from having met during the summers. This assessment is supported by the mayor of Sturno, who speaks at a public press conference held at City Hall on September 3, 1977. The 2 investigators then visit a farming family in the village of Gesualdo, not far from Sturno. The family recalls seeing something unusual in the sky about 5 or 6 days earlier. They describe it as a strange star shot, a bright, fire-red object with an apparent diameter of about 10 centimeters when viewed at arm's length. It remained visible for several minutes. At one point, the object stopped. Then, a red beam of light was emitted downward, directed toward the ground in the direction of Sturno. Based on the description, the investigators conclude that the beam was a form of solid light. After a short time, the beam withdrew, and the object quickly vanished into the sky. The family was deeply struck by the event. They interpreted it as a sign from the devil. This happened at the same time the 7 men were making their observations between Sturno and Frigento. Engineer Carmine Cangaro, based in Naples, conducts a noteworthy experiment. His goal is to estimate the weight of the object that may have left the 3 marks on the plateau. He begins by reconstructing an isosceles triangle, using the placement of the impressions as a guide. Then he analyzes the elasticity of 1 square centimeter of the ground. Based on this data, he calculates that around 40 tons of vertical pressure would be needed to produce similar marks. At the site, the investigators and their colleagues also find fragments of stone inside one of the larger impressions. The stones appear to have been crushed under a very heavy load. The investigators analyze a sample taken from the surface, where the object appears to have made contact with the ground. The results show that the base of the sample consists of calcium carbonate, with the presence of magnesium, iron, and other trace elements. On the upper part of the sample, where it was in direct contact with the object, they find small traces of a metallic substance. Because the quantity is so limited, they are unable to perform spectrographic or chemical and physical analysis. What they can confirm is this: the silver-colored substance does not oxidize when exposed to water or air. Taken together, the results of the experiment suggest that a heavy object with unusual properties made contact with the ground at the site. The impressions, crushed stones, and traces of a non-oxidizing metallic substance point to something physical and technologically advanced. While no definitive identification is made, the evidence strongly supports the witnesses' claim that something unexplained and material occurred at the location. In addition to the physical investigations, some of the witnesses are placed under hypnosis to examine their memories in greater depth. Mario Sisto is examined in Naples by psychologist Dr. Mario D'Antuono. He states that it is not possible to invent a story while under hypnosis. During the session, Sisto describes what he experienced that night. The second witness to undergo hypnosis is Michele Riafoli, who is hypnotized by Dr. Antonio Prevate, also in Naples. After the session, Dr. Prevate states that there is no doubt whatsoever that Riafoli's experience is genuine. In his expert opinion, Riafoli had indeed stood before a being that was not human. A few days later, Mario Sisto and Michele Riafoli were invited to Turin by the well-known American newspaper, The National Enquirer. There, Each was hypnotized separately by Professor Franco Granone, neurologist and professor of psychiatry at the University of Turin. After the session, Professor Granone stated, "I can confirm that both individuals were in deep hypnosis. During the session, they fully repeated what they had heard or believed they had heard. Deception can be ruled out. They have honestly perceived, observed, or sensed the being. They are, in other words, sincere." Now, what do you make of this case? Do you agree with those of us who think that the close encounter of the third kind in Sturno stands out? The details are consistent. The timeline holds. The witnesses come from different walks of life. They are students, a teacher, a turner, a photographer, and a baritone. They do not spend time together. They come from different backgrounds. They live separate lives, and they are not interested in publicity. Still, they all describe the same events in the same way. No one contradicts the others. Their accounts are reinforced under hypnosis and echoed by a farming family in another village describing something eerily similar in the sky. Not everything can be verified. Some details will always remain out of reach, but the physical traces are there. The impressions in the ground, the crushed stone, the unexplained metallic residue, the being that moved without bending its knees. And when the men try to report what they saw, they're told to keep quiet. The local police listen, but quickly move to contain the story. No formal inquiry, no follow-up. Just quiet conversations and subtle reminders that this kind of event isn't meant for public discussion, that someone higher up is already aware. Which brings us back to a familiar question. One that keeps appearing, case after case. Are these humanoids living beings, or are they machines? But the most important question the men are left with is even simpler. Because whatever it was they saw on that hill, whether a living creature or a machine, someone knew. Someone was already in the loop. It was not the first time, and it might not be the last. Thank you for watching Stories Lost. If you'd like to support our work in bringing attention to older, forgotten UFO cases, please leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. This week, we'd like to thank the following for the coffee. And the super thanks. And of course, a huge thank you to all our ongoing supporters. You're the best. See you next week.